that you're able, if you don't feel that you are able to ask the question and wanted to put it into the chat, then that's another option. Though in the past, we found that doesn't really work quite as well as people asking their own question. I think that concludes all of the housekeeping items. So I'm delighted that we are tonight welcoming Jonathan Kuttab. He is a co-founder of the Palestinian human rights group Al-Haq and co-founder of Nonviolence International. A well-known international human rights attorney, Jonathan practices in the United States, Palestine, and Israel. He serves on the board of Bethlehem Bible College. He is president of the board of Holy Land Trust. Jonathan was the head of the legal committee negotiating the Cairo Agreement of 1994 between Israel and the PLO. He's currently the executive director of Friends of Sabeel North America, mostly known as FOSNA. So, Jonathan, we are delighted that you're here with us tonight and look forward to what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. The topic that has been assigned is really very, very important. I think if we look for hope, we must first start talking about the current crisis that we are in. My father used to say, before you hear the good news of the gospel, you have to hear the bad news, that you're a sinner going to hell, but there is salvation for you. So until you hear the bad news, you're not really about to accept the good news. The bad news, and I think it's something that is felt by everybody, is that we are now in a crisis. The two-state solution, to which I myself dedicated a lot of my time and effort even before it became the accepted formula, has now very, very clearly collapsed. There are no prospects in the near future for a Palestinian state, even on that little 22% of Palestine that was contemplated by the two-state solution. The settlements not only have expanded in size, in numbers, in population, but also in infrastructure, in administrative and legal spread, in their tentacles throughout Israeli society. Israel can no longer exist without the settlements and the settlers. And the settlers are no longer supported by the government. They are the government. They are in the government. They are just going wild all over the West Bank. No longer do we find settlements as being small, isolated communities with a fence around them. They are now totally illegal, lawless presence throughout the occupied territories. They have these what's called shepherd or animal settlements, where a settler just sets up this cottage and then has his herd run all over the areas around him, attacking Arab villages, Arab fields, Arab properties with total impunity. So the collapse of the two-state solution presents a real crisis to everybody who's been active on the issues of peace and justice in the last 30, 40 years, certainly since 1967, because it forces everyone to go back to the table, question every assumption, think out of the box. Because Zionism, in the sense of trying to set up a Jewish state, has now failed, in the sense that within the borders of the supposed Jewish state, there's 7 million non-Jews who are going nowhere, who are there, whether it's as Israeli subjects, third, fourth class citizens, whether they are under their control, military control, whether they are totally besieged, like in Gaza, whether they are in a unclear status, like East Jerusalemites. There's 7 million non-Jews, both citizens and subjects of the state of Israel, and they're going nowhere. The only option now for them is either apartheid, a system where they are not citizens, not equal, almost not human, with few or no rights, or if not apartheid, then there is no solution. The two-state solution that acted as an alibi for a while is gone. And for Palestinians also, we have a crisis. And the crisis is not only because of the tremendous gap in power between us and our oppressors, it's not also because of the fragmentation of our community into 4 or 5 different communities living totally at the behest and at the mercy and under the control of the state of Israel, but also being given separate systems of governance that require a number of different challenges. If you're a Palestinian living in the Galilee or the Negev, or if you're a Palestinian living in Jerusalem, or if you're a Palestinian living in Gaza, or if you're a Palestinian living in the West Bank, regardless of whether you're living in area A, B, or C, or whether you're in the diaspora, a refugee. Each of these 5 separate designations carries with it its own challenges and its own problems. But even apart from that, we still have a crisis of leadership, and also a crisis of ideology. The idea of a Palestinian state, whether it's in the 22% of Palestine or in all of Palestine, still carries within it an existential crisis. How can we say Palestine Arabiya, Palestine is Arab, when there are 7 million non-Arabs, Jewish Israelis living within historic Palestine, who, apart from their power, their tremendous power, they still are living there and they consider it their home? How can we coexist with such a population? We need to think out of the box. Palestinian nationalism, Palestine Arabiya, the dream of a Palestinian state no longer exists. And a Jewish state no longer exists in this historic Palestine. Where do we go from here? Some of you may have heard of my little book, Beyond the Two-State Solution, where I describe how this goal of 2 states has in fact collapsed and cannot be revived. And then I say, well, what do we do then? How can we live together in any kind of formula that is acceptable, that is meaningful, that has justice at its core, that provides some measure of equality, of human rights, of dignity, and satisfies some of the national aspirations. For the Palestinians, this is absolutely essential. For Jewish Israelis, it's also important because they didn't put all that effort and created all this monstrosity just to say, forget it, we will disappear. They are not going to disappear either. Can we live together? Is there possible formula that satisfies both of us? I think there is. I don't claim that this is the ideal situation, but I claim that what's used to be called a secular democratic state in all of Palestine, a hybrid state with democracy with equality can still be created that has sufficient guardrails, sufficient constitutional guarantees to assure both sides. Again, please do not see anything that I say as implying in any way parity or equality or symmetry between the two sides. There is no such symmetry. Legal, historical, moral, on any level. But apart from the arguments for each side, the reality on the ground today calls for a new situation, for a new solution. And I think it is possible to satisfy the desires and hopes of each side, except for exclusivity. You can have an Arab state, a Palestinian Arab state, that is not exclusively Arab, because half the people living in it are not Arabs. And at the same time, you can have a Jewish state in all of historic Palestine, and yet not exclusively Jewish, because half the people living in it are not Jews. Is that possible? It's a dream. It sounds like almost utopian, but it's a real vision that has its roots both in Arab national, Palestinian national movement, where it used to be the official position of the PLO until it was beaten out of it by those who says you cannot talk about one state. And also there were some Zionist thinkers early on who understood and accepted the possibility of Palestinian Arabs being equal partners in the state that they were envisioning. So there are some roots for it, I think. But there is also a lot more need for it now, because the traditional paradigm has failed. The ideological ideal for both sides cannot be achieved, no matter how powerful and how military power and how much diplomatic power you have. You really cannot impose or create or force your vision on the other side and on the rest of the world. But if you are open to new thinking, if you are open to seeing the other not just as existential threat and an existential erosion for you and your people and your movement and your hopes and aspiration, then maybe we can work out a solution that is genuinely democratic, but yet that carries enough constitutional guarantees to ensure whoever doesn't have 51%, whoever is in the minority, and that could change over time for a whole number of reasons, because democracy doesn't mean absolute control and oppression by 51% over the minorities. You need to have a constitution that safeguards the rights of the minorities as well as the rights of the individual, but yet maintains a democratic structure with elections, with a free press, with an independent judiciary, with the rule of law, and with a constitution and structures that are carefully created, that cannot be changed by the mere whim of a parliamentary majority that we see now. Even Israel itself is realizing how fragile their system can be, where a small minority can hijack the entire country because there are no rules and there are no constraints. There is no constitution and therefore no real genuine democracy in the state of Israel, even apart from the occupied territories. The need for a constitution, the need for structural guarantees to guarantee the rights of the minority and the individual are important. Now, you will say, all this is well and good. How do we achieve that? How do we move towards such a almost utopian vision? And there are answers. There are specific steps that one can take. This doesn't happen overnight. No powerful, privileged group gives up their privilege just because they had a divine moment of inspiration. We need struggle to achieve that goal, but it's something that we can struggle for and that we can jointly struggle for. This is not going to be the victory of one side over the other. It's going to be, if it comes about, the victory of justice, the victory of equality, the victory of a better future, of democracy against a system that is built on supremacy, on apartheid, on separation, on one group dominating the other group. This is my vision anyway, but I challenge everyone to tell me or to give me a vision that commends itself to the moral and ethical and human rights of both sides, because I don't see it out there. And I think that those who keep continuing to hang on to this mirage, to this facade of a two states, really do not have something to offer, either to the Palestinians or to the Israeli Jews. And if you have had the chance to read my book, and I understand that quite a number of people on this call have read my little book, and you have some critique of it, you think it fails in some way, I'd like to hear that, because I think we need to work together for a better vision. Right now at FOSNA, Friends of Sabeel North America, our interest is obviously theological. It's also an activist interest to bring the interest to be a voice for Palestine and for Palestinians. We have a campaign against apartheid, asking churches, communities, mosques, denominations to declare themselves opposed to apartheid-free movement. We have another campaign to preach Palestine, to urge people in this coming Christmas Advent season to either preach a sermon or have some prayers or some involvement in their church services about Palestine, so that we do not get forgotten. We have several campaigns from time to time about particular issues, whether it's Tent of Nations, whether it's Muhammad Halabi, whether it's children in military courts, whether it's a campaign against allowing tax exemption for so-called charities like Regavim that support settlements and that support apartheid, and yet claim tax-exempt status in the United States and elsewhere. These are part or a few of the activities that we are conducting. And I'm very pleased about the series that you have to try and talk about the basis for hope. Because I myself am full of hope. I'm not terribly optimistic about the current situation. I make a clear distinction between such optimism and the principle of hope, where we have faith in the ultimate victory of justice, in the ultimate victory of those who call for equality, than those who want to live by the sword and those who think somehow overwhelming military might can give them security or can achieve the goals that they have. I am pleased to open up a discussion with all of you, particularly those who have had a chance to read my book. By the way, you can download an electronic copy for free in English, in Arabic, or in Hebrew. I thought it was necessary that the book be published in all three languages exactly as I wrote it, because we need to be true to one another. We need to speak our minds. Sometimes what we say is very controversial and difficult to accept. But we have to be. There has to be a sense of integrity. We have to say what we believe, and we have to say what we think, and we have to be open to listening to each other and to one another. I will end here. Maybe I should mention that I have another book that came out. It's called The Truth Shall Set You Free. It is less of a political pamphlet than it is a memoir that tells a lot of stories about my own faith journey and my own work in human rights and my own work during particularly the first Intifada, working for nonviolence and working for these issues. You may want to look that up. I heard today that it's become also available in audio format as well as in paperback and Kindle forms. So I will stop here and turn it over to you so that you can have some discussion and questions and answers.